Welcome to Rotten Taste, where we take a look at movies under 60% on Rotten Tomatoes and kind of tell you what we think of them. And today, we are looking at the 1993 film Robin Hood, Men in Tights. This was directed by Mel Brooks and stars Cary Elwes and Dave Chappelle in his very first role. A 20-year-old Dave Chappelle.
Oh, shit.
Enough.
This is the first role?
First role. Very first role. Little story behind that a little later. But this movie, Soto, has a 42% score on Rotten Tomatoes. So, yes, anyone that knows Mel Brooks knows a lot of his classics, from Blazing Saddles, History of the World, Spaceballs, which might come up at a later date, but Robin Hood Men in Tights, it is so stupid and so catchy, but it's Mel Brooks. You can't go wrong with a lot of the shit that happens in this film. This movie, if people don't know, in 1991, there's a film, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, starring Kevin Costner. And this came out, 2 years later. This heavily parodies not just Men of Thieves, that's the big one, but Robin Hood in general. But Cary Elwes got actually offered the role of Men in Tights, and he turned it down because he didn't want to be known as a sword fighter, like as a Princess Bride. But when he read Men in Tights, he thought it was a joke, but he was in. But anyhow... Soto, when you first saw this way back in the day, when you were 13 years old, what were your initial thoughts when you saw Men in Tights? How much? And I know you love this movie. We talk about it quite a few times. But what were your initial thoughts of Men in Tights?
I mean, I loved it. Obviously, that's my mentality. And I think I was 12 years old maybe when this came out. Whatever. But I was always a big fan of, like the Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun movies, and those kind of like parody kind of movies where it's like a joke a minute kind of a vibe, which they don't really, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe somebody will correct me too, but I don't really see movies like this anymore that are just like outright silly. Because you will have your comedies, Adam Sandler movies and things like that are just comedies that are just like, okay, there's a story to them, but there's funny things that happen. But these kind of movies where it's just everything's a gag, you just don't see it. And sometimes it doesn't hit, but most of the time it does, and it's really great. I think that the thing that this reminds me of, the last thing I could think of was something like the Scary Movie franchise that came out, like that's probably like 20 years from now. That came out, like that kind of gag thing, and it's like I'm watching this movie, and of course it's like low rated, but there used to be these movies that were just silly, like just for the fact of being silly. Like, watching it now versus watching it when I was 12 is much different because the jokes are way more like dated. But there were still parts that I was dying laughing. I mean, Richard Lewis in this is goddamn hilarious. And I think it started really getting funny when Richard Lewis was in it too. So, but to go back to your point, when I was younger, I thought this was fucking fine because at the time, I'm a kid, I have a juvenile sense of humor, and all these jokes are pretty, like, bottom of the barrel. There's nothing complicated to them. It's not, like, cinema, like, masterpiece or anything like that, but I absolutely enjoyed it. And then rewatching it now, I still enjoy it. I'm not going into a movie like this and expecting it to be a perfect movie every time. There's going to be jokes. They're not going to hit. It's going to remind me of certain things. I'm going to look forward to some of the moments that used to make me laugh when I was younger, and they still did. And so, again, I think that this is a movie that, if you're in the right mindset, holds up very well.
Agreed. And like you said, it's just a bunch of gags, a bunch of breaking the fourth wall. It's been a while since I've last seen this movie. I mean, I say been a while, but maybe like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. I couldn't remember the last time I sat down and watched this from end to end. But, I obviously saw Spaceballs first. I actually saw Spaceballs in theaters.
Me too.
And I love Star Wars, so I love Mel Brooks and what he did. So, seeing this and seeing Prince of Thieves, it's hard. You hear the songs, and the songs are just perfect. Like, I feel like a lot of the songs in this stand the test of times, and it's hilarious. Yes, there's some jokes. I'm like, okay, it kind of misses mark. I'm like, did it miss its mark when I was 13? Maybe not, because like you said, the juvenile sense of humor. Maybe times are a little different. And I'm like, there was a few jokes that just kind of struck out, but they're like, hey, let's just keep swinging. And I mean, I know we're just going to talk about bits because, you can't really pick apart a movie like Men in Tights, but I think one of the funniest shit that I always laugh at outside of the songs, especially where Men in Tights, was when they meet Little John. You know, that
Oh God, yeah.
scene, not just the whole crossing the river and Dave Chappelle, I'm on one side, I'm on the other side, I'm on east side, and then just the stick fight and how they just go down. Obviously, just trying to hit the bare knuckle because it breaks every time into a smaller stick. And then
Yes.
finally at the end, when Little John, just like, he's done in all the Robin Hood lore, he can't swim. And that's the big thing. But in this one, he's in this, very shallow brook. He's just like, his back got barely wet. I love that scene. And, it's just shit like that. You just sit back and laugh. You're like, you don't expect how absurd it gets, and it gets there, and you're like, I'm okay with it. I love this. So, plus, I love Cary Elwes.
Yeah.
I always loved a lot of the stuff he's done. Obviously, I mentioned Princess Bride, but he was just such a great actor and fun actor. So, oh my god.
Yeah, can I just say, Dave Chappelle, wow, he has aged wonderfully. Because seeing him in this movie, I'm like, that's Dave Chappelle. And if I see Dave Chappelle now, I'm like, that's still Dave Chappelle. Like, his presence is just great. I mean, I don't know. Although I thought it was funny seeing, like, the 90s references, like, to the pump shoes and stuff.
But yeah, I also had to laugh. One of the things I read was, back when Siskel and Ebert was, huge in the 90s, they were everywhere. Gene Siskel actually called this one of the worst films in 1993, and
Wow.
and I'm like, how could this be one of the worst films? I'm like, I get it. Parody movies are not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. If you don't want to laugh at silly, stupid, that's just not your sense of humor. But that's what this movie is meant to be. How could this be one of the worst in 1993?
It's better than Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
It is.
I think I saw that movie once, and I honestly don't give a fuck about it.
Nope.
So even the joke about he's the Robin Hood that can speak with an English accent or whatever, it's like that.
Yeah.
Because obviously Kevin Costner is Kevin Costner in every movie he plays. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to have somebody criticize me for that take, but pretty much if I see Kevin Costner, I know exactly who he's going to be in every movie that I see or TV show or whatever. He's fucking Kevin Costner. He's not going to go above that. He just has really good presence. But Prince of Thieves, like, I didn't fucking watch. I think is Morgan Freeman in that?
Morgan Freeman, Christian Slater is in it. Alan Rickman's in it. Sean Connery played King Richard, the cameo at the end, which I have again another interesting fact which I read about Sean Connery, and that'll come up. But yeah, I did see Prince of Thieves, and from what I remember, I'm like, again, I think I was 13 at the time. I'm like, all right, this is good. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed it at the time because I do love the Robin Hood lore. But you're right, Kevin Costner, they tried to have him speak with the British accent, and he couldn't. So they just speak normally. But
I feel like I enjoyed Waterworld more than Prince of Thieves, for God's sakes.
But back to Men in Tights. No, it's all right. But yeah, with Men in Tights, it was just fun, and and just reliving a lot of these things, and I still have questions. If I look at this logically, like I have a question. This is an honest to God question. I get the whole joke behind it and stuff like that, but the chastity belt. I'm like,
okay, here we go. I know what you're gonna say. Go right ahead.
Like this seems like the most unsanitary fucking thing in the world. Like,
yes, I kept thinking the same fucking thing. I'm like, I get the joke, but from a practicality standpoint, like I had a lot of questions. I didn't question it when I was a kid. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But being in my 40s now, I'm looking at it and going, that's always on.
Yeah,
always.
And so
always
yeah,
on.
I mean, what? No one's got the key. I mean, yeah, we know what we're talking about. But I don't know how she does it. But you know what? I mean, that thing looks pristine, because I'm assuming Maid Marian, Robin Hood, 20-ish, but...
Made from Everlast,
Yeah.
It's
another... Well, there is a lot of ridiculousness in this, like you said, it was this, you texted me, there was the joke about the club, and if people don't remember what the club was for your fucking cars back in the 90s, you're a little too young, but this thing was hilarious, and we joked about it, and I forgot this is the movie until you mentioned it, you texted me like, oh my god, there's a club joke, I'm like, oh my god, yeah. He puts it on the fucking horse, like it makes no sense, because all someone has to do is pull it out of the ground, but still,
but so 90s, right? You can't take a movie like this seriously. Like, I get the whole Siskel and Ebert thing. I get it. Like, this is not like really a movie that you would consider to be a good movie. Of course not. It's silly. It's a parody. It has an 81% audience score. So, if you're watching this, as for what it is, it's highly fucking entertaining. To your point, tons of 90s references, right? Because it's like just trying to kind of cash in on like the newest fads and everything like that, but it's fucking silly. Like Robin Hood Men in Tights never hurt anybody. There's no reason to call it the worst movie of the year. That's crazy. I've seen
No,
bad
especially with
movies.
characters named Chew and Blinkin and this.
Oh my God, Blinkin was so fucking hilarious, man. He was reading the Braille version of
Playboy.
Playboy. It's just, yeah, it's made for 12-year-olds. And you know what? I'll always be a 12-year-old in my heart. That's why I like pretty much every Adam Sandler movie, to a point. I think it starts getting to, but like, Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, like I could put those on right now and it still, hits all the right notes that I'm looking for it to do. And Robin Hood Men in Tights, really does a great job in that. And it's a very specific movie in time, but it does its job better than Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Like, because I don't think anybody's gonna ever remember Robin Hood Prince of Thieves at all, like in just the history of movies. But there are people who are gonna look at Robin Hood Men in Tights and always have nostalgia towards it.
I have a mole.
Oh God,
Uh,
dude, he's so fucking funny in this movie, man. Like that's when I really started laughing when I rewatched it, was when Richard Lewis, like the scenes came up and everything like that. And it's like him in latrine.
oh yeah.
Um, just his delivery of things and everything like that. Like his facial expressions just make me fucking laugh, dude. He was great.
So there's a couple things I want to bring up about the end of this movie, just again antidotes and whatnot before
Sure.
we end this. But we did talk about Sean Connery. He did play King Richard in Prince of Thieves, and in this movie it was Patrick Stewart. Well, originally Sean Connery was going to play King Richard again in Men in Thieves, but he wanted to play King Richard in drag. He thought that was going to be funny, and he asked for $1 million. And Mel Brooks was like, "That's way too much money for one scene." That's why they said. That's why they said no. But if they got Sean Connery, he's like, "I will do it, but I need to dress as a woman. I think that's going to be funny."
That
And
would have
I'm
been
just like,
awesome.
I don't know, because again, Patrick Stewart, he had his couple moments. But yeah, I would have loved to seen a drag Sean Connery. But $1 million for this movie.
It would have fit right into the vibe too. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Men in Tights. Like you said, my wife, the instant I was popping this on, she was ready to watch. We
Yeah, her
texted
too. Yeah,
Ethan.
my
We were
wife
like,
too.
hey, we're
Yeah.
watching this. He came in the room, and we just all watched it. It was fun. And that's what this movie is. It is fun.
Yes.
Obviously, you can't take it serious. But is this one of Mel Brooks' best? No, there's a couple more I do like more, and we might get to it another time. But as you said, just with
I agree.
like other comedies, I can put this on, and I'm happy. You know what? I'm singing along. I'm doing Men in Tights, tights. I will do every
Yeah.
voice inclination of that song, and I don't care. But yes,
No,
I
Sarah
love
did
Men.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
As soon
you
as I
just
brought this
have
up,
to.
Sarah was like, "We're watching this," and I'm like, "Here we go." And she was like, "This is one of my favorite movies." I'm like, "Absolutely." So it's just, and I was talking to her about it while watching. I'm like, things are just taken way too seriously these days. And I hate to be old man yelling at clouds like we usually are on these things, but holy shit, man! Like there was a time where it's like we could be silly and nobody was like judging anybody about it. I mean, obviously people called this a terrible movie, but it's just like just relax. Like we can make fun of each other and we can have a good time and we could be silly and it could be dumb. And the Naked Gun movies, I don't know what those are rated, but those movies are fucking like classic. And I think there's a Loaded Weapon or something like that with
Yep.
another one, with Emilio
Emilio
Estevez
Estevez, Samuel L.
and
Jackson as
Samuel
well.
Jackson. And that movie, which I have on DVD because somebody gave it to me because I talked about it so much, which is I think a parody of Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, correct. I have
Um,
not seen that in ages.
So fucking good. But that whole genre of just silly stuff, it needs to come back, and I hope it does.
Yeah, I can't think of anything recent. Like you brought up the scary movies, and then they went on to do so much, like epic movie, disaster, like every genre they were making fun of after
That probably
the
killed
success of
it.
Scary Movie.
That probably
They
killed
did.
it. That's probably
They
what killed it.
It could be because I can't remember the last kind of parody movie, and maybe that's just the state of movies in nowadays. I mean,
Yeah.
they've already done a superhero movie, which mimicked a lot of the superhero movies in the that was before Marvel even went crazy with all their shit.
Mhm.
So, but you're right. I mean, it's tough because a lot of things can't get parodied today like they could in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Films, there's not as many films out there as back then where they could parody something. So it would be very tough for this genre to come back in this the state of the world, and just. I'm going to say it, lack of quality movies. I know that that sounds like, old man talking, but it's true. We've talked about this, a lot of the movies when there's more choices, 80s and 90s, even 2000s, a lot, but now there's not as many movies coming out. A lot of movies go straight to streaming. So I don't know. It's hard to parody something that not a lot of people have seen. And everyone loves Robin Hood. So.
Well, movies used to be like a cultural thing, right? You didn't have a lot of options. So, and that's what we talk about nowadays. You have streaming, you have all these things. So not everybody sees everything, right? We talk about, I make fun of you all the time for not watching movies, but it's like there's so many things. There's TV shows. We've got, a TV show coming out pretty soon on the 18th that we're going to be watching. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of different things that like ask for our time. And back then when we were young, we didn't have the internet. So it's like you had movies. So like these summer blockbusters like Independence Day, like you would go to the movies like on opening weekend, you would be packed and everybody would be watching these movies and then people would be talking about these movies. So these movies became like these big things that everybody would talk about. So when the parodies came out, well, enough people had seen the movie that they could watch it and be like, okay, yeah, I get this joke. I get how this is making fun of it, like, and then they would be popular. But it's so tough to do that now because, I mean, what's the last, like, really blockbuster movie that came out? Dune? Like that 15-hour, like, fucking epic of Dune, which I still, like, look at on HBO Max and I'm like, am I ever going to hit play on this? I don't know when I'm going to have 2.5 hours to kill. I don't know. You know what I mean? So, to your point, it's just the way of the world, I don't know if I necessarily agree if movies are not as good anymore because I think that there are still good movies, but I don't think that movies are as impactful as they used to be on like the general kind of idea of stuff,
I shouldn't say they're not as good. They're just not as many. There was a time when there was a lot, things to choose from. Now, like I said, I mean, we had, Barbie and Oppenheimer and all that other shit, Dune, and
oh yeah,
So it's
I haven't seen either of those.
Neither have I.
Any of those.
But that's what I'm saying. When you're looking at like 2024, and there's really 3-4 big movies, where in the past, like every week or two, there was yes, there is good movies. Don't get me wrong. There's just not as many, and there's just not a genre to make fun of. I think they could have done something with the Marvel movies that's about close, but then you got Deadpool. So anyhow, that might be a discussion for another day. We kind of got off track. Bringing it back to Men in Tights. If you have not seen Men in Tights, go watch it. It is hilarious.
Please.
It is free on
free.
Tubi. And you know what? It's Mel Brooks. If you just want to sit back and laugh, and if you don't get 90s references, it's okay. You know what? You'll still laugh at this film. I guarantee it. So, any final thoughts on Men in Tights before we end this? So.
No, just that it's like you said, great movie. It's free. Go watch it, please. 81% audience score. This is a great movie.
Yeah. Well, that is it for Rotten Taste. Let us know what you thought of Men in Tights. Did you like it? Did you not? What's your favorite scene? Tell us in the comments what your favorite scene from this movie is, because there is a lot to choose from. But until next time, just remember, unlike other podcasts that you might listen to, we actually speak with a New England accent.
We sure do, guy.